Vocab Gal at www.sadlerschool.com. So please check her out. Sarah has taught English language arts for over 13 years and is now the head librarian at her high school. Sarah is a national board certified teacher and received the Ohio English Teacher of the Year Award and several other awards and designations throughout her career. Sarah is also a part of the Sadler family with her weekly blog, Vocab Gal. We are happy to have Sarah here today to share with us her great ideas for preparing students, high school students, for the SAT and the ACT exams. Sarah, it's always lovely to have you. Thank you so much for using your webcam so we can see you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura, and you're turning the controls over to me now.
Yes.
For good or for ill.
Just a minute.
And I will start talking and say how excited I am. As an English teacher, I feel like this is my sort of thing that I needed the most, is what are especially the new SAT and the ACT, and how can I best prepare my students? Because there's so many tests that they're taking, and this is something that they do not so much with me, so I want to make sure that I'm still preparing them for success after my class. So I'm excited about all the research and preparation I've done to make sure that these would be great strategies for me as well as for you.
There you go.
All right, so here I am. I'm going to show you my screen, and here we go. All right, so we have to have a goal for the day. That's how we do it for our students, and that's how we do it for ourselves. So here our goal is to have this working knowledge of skills and strategies for the students to do well on the SAT and ACT tests. And these are really skills and strategies that are applicable right away. So you're going to get some handouts at the end. They'll be sent to you in an email. And this is one of my absolute favorites, which is the top 5 tips for preparing students. And this is really just in class, what you can do every day to help them be great word learners. And these skills are really applicable to our standardized tests. So my first tip is really pretty basic, but we don't take time to do it enough. And it's to make complicated words mundane. And you see what I did there? The word mundane itself is complicated, but if we just say it, oh, that's so mundane all the time, then students really feel like these are just mundane words. They're not big, scary words anymore. And so you can see my 2 words that we start out with for level F, specifically in the Sadler books: approbation, meaning deserving of praise, and meritorious, which is someone who does, something that is deserving of praise. So anytime somebody does something well, I say, oh, that was worthy of approbation, wasn't it? Or, oh, you are so meritorious. Thank you so much for turning in your paper on time. And so these big, scary words begin to sound so routine that when they see the word approbation, they're no longer freaked out. And they no longer think of long, complicated vocabulary words as something to be intimidated by. But they're just sort of part of the everyday lexicon. So again, words like belligerent, stop being so belligerent, stop being truculent. Instead of saying stop being hostile or something easy, just start making your vocabulary words really part of your everyday lesson plan descriptions and commands to students and feedback to students. So that's my number 1 tip. And then we'll go on to tip number 2. And this, again, taking those complicated words, and for every complicated word that students know for their vocabulary, match it with an easy synonym. So the word sanguine, or sanguine, I often say it wrong. Sanguine is something that my students who were AP students didn't know and struggled with. So I always said, okay, guys, think about sanguine, think about the word jolly. So every time you think of sanguine, think of a similar word, and so that they're automatically paired together and they know how to write with it, so that they can sort of insert that synonym and say, does that sound right? Okay, then now I know that sanguine is right here. So, and sometimes it's 2 words. So, for example, inveigh, you have to say urge strongly. You just can't say urge necessarily. So really to push strongly or to push heavily, really giving them a phrase or a word that they can just insert instead. A really easy strategy is simply to just keep reiterating the words. So for me, in my classroom, the students, anytime they say a vocabulary word, they get a sticker. And I make someone else be in charge of it because I have a lot of things going on in the classroom all at once. But sometimes they do it just for brownie points. But really, again, it's that making the complicated words mundane, the more that we say them as educators, but also the more that they say them as students. And they have to say them correctly, and they can't just say, hey, the vocab word of the day is truculent. They have to say, hey, dude, don't be truculent. And so really making them reiterate the words often makes these really intimidating words, again, much more routine. I also have just a blanket policy that anytime students write, whether it be an exit ticket on the way out or a complicated essay, whatever we're doing, they have to incorporate vocabulary into their writing. And this is really an important strategy because when students say, well, why do we have to know these words? It's to make you better writers. That's one of the first and foremost things to say. It's not just, well, so that you can do better on your SAT and ACT, which is also a really important goal, but they have to see life outside of that. So the more that they can write with their vocabulary, and that's the expectation, the more those words, again, become part of their lexicon. And then finally, we do a lot of Socratic seminars and other places where they are talking to each other. And so when it's a more formalized discussion, part of when they respond to each other is they actually have to use vocabulary when they give a response, or their response doesn't count, or they don't get as many points. So the idea that in their conversations with each other in formal ways as well as the informal getting a sticker, they're earning credit for using vocabulary. My next one, so this is, and we're going to talk about this strategy a lot, is reading sentences aloud with vocabulary options. And this is just the more that we say words, so many students are auditory learners, and so the more that they just hear words said over and over again in correct context, the better that when they actually see them on tests and they read sentences aloud with vocabulary options, they can hear, well, I remember when we said it in class so often, it sounded like this. This just doesn't make sense here, or I just don't hear the same rhythm. And so we will talk about this again later with specific examples, but I always tell my students, whether it be a vocabulary test that they're taking at the end of the week, and it's a fill in the blank, or on the SAT and ACT later, if you can say, even quietly, really aloud to yourself, that full sentence, putting in the options, the more you're going to hear and hopefully pick the right one. Trust those instincts, I tell my students. And then really, the idea of breaking down word parts is not new. And there's a lot of study about, should you teach students just word parts, which I have found really not a helpful strategy, because if you give kids too many words that all start with the same root, they start to be confused and say, okay, what does this mean versus what does this mean? And it was really problematic in my class. So I don't do a word study unit per se where we say, okay, let's talk about every word that starts with bene. But in this case, when we come to a word like benign or malevolent, we say, okay, guys, how do you know this word means good or bad? So a benign tumor versus a malignant tumor, being beneficent versus being malevolent. And so looking at the word parts in the midst of what you're already learning for vocabulary seems to me to work better, because they'll have a sense of what those words mean. They'll think, okay, if I look at this word, I know other words that have the same prefix or suffix, and then they can start to figure things out without that sort of deep, complicated study necessarily of word parts. So just giving them that strategy to use as you're teaching a vocabulary word for the day works well for me. Again, prefixes, suffixes, roots. Do it when it feels natural, less didactic teaching, but more specific for words. So those essentially are my top 5 tips. And then we need to sort of move on to what does the SAT and ACT look like specifically, because how do we make sure that they really are great test takers? And so really they have a lot in common, and they redesign the SAT to make it real world relevant and to bring it to all students. And so really we have what we expect from any strong reading test, that it's asking for knowledge of relevant words, but they put them in some context, that they're asking for students to read passages and analyze themes and main ideas, that students start to understand the author's craft and be able to interpret the author's purpose. So both the SAT and the ACT have reading passages that students then have to answer questions for. Some have more passages and some have less, but the big key here is that the questions are now very similar. So what I did is I made these two really awesome sheets. They're brand new. You guys are the first ones to see them, so be excited. And they look really similar because the top three tips are the same, but what we did is Sadler created actual, they pulled passages, they made SAT specific questions and ACT specific questions, and so I pulled that passage and then I pulled questions right from there. So students not only see the tip, but then they have a real life example that you can work through with them. So let me show you what that looks like. So excited. All right, so my very first tip, just like we talked about in the first handout, is if the question asks you to define a word, replace the original word with each of the answer choices. So here's a specific example created that looks just like the SAT, and there's a passage that goes with this that you're not seeing, but here is the sentence in context. One is sometimes asked about the obstacles that confront novice writers who want to start their careers doing good work. Okay, so then the question asks us in line 2, what does novice mean? So again, we take the word talented and we put it in here. One is sometimes asked about the obstacles that confront talented writers who want to start their careers doing good work. Okay, so we're not seeing anything here, start their careers doing good work. Good may be something with talented, but it just doesn't sound right. One is sometimes asked about obstacles that confront beginning writers who want to start their careers doing good work. Okay, now we see the context clue of start. That's going to help us out. We like B. And we can put it in to confront hardworking writers who want to start their careers doing good work. All right, we don't see any other context clues that help us with hardworking. And then saying finally confront experienced writers who want to start their careers doing good work. Well, this is start their careers, so they're definitely not going to be experienced. So process of elimination, context clues, beginning is going to work best for us. Yay, we have our first strategy under wraps, and that's noticed specifically for the SAT. Same tip. ACT, if your school focuses more on the ACT than the SAT, again, we have a little more tailored questions for each test. So then here is the sentence in context. One commenced early in life with the ignoble goal of getting along easy, shunning work and casting for the easy way. So again, ignoble means most nearly, difficult, all right, with the difficult goal of getting along easy, doesn't make much sense. With the lofty goal of getting along easy, shunning work, and casting for the easy way. It doesn't seem very lofty, but maybe a student doesn't know what lofty means, so they put a question mark by that. Process of elimination, maybe that'll work. All right, one commenced early in life with the low goal of getting along easy, shunning work, and casting for the easy way. Well, it doesn't seem like a good goal, so that sounds kind of low. And then the realistic goal of getting along easy, shunning work, and casting for the easy way. Hopefully that doesn't sound realistic. So we're between lofty and low. And then again, this could be a word part issue that if they know what a loft is, that means high. So low seems like if we have to go high or low goal, that's going to be a low goal. So really work them through each of the answers and say, okay, what does this mean? Why do you think it means that? Where do we see context clues here? Putting in those each individual word into that sentence. So that's tip number 1. Now, tip number 2 is really about justifying answers. And this is really a strategy that I use with my students a great deal because they like to argue and they like to say this is how it is. I say, okay, you have to justify your answer. You have to give me evidence that supports your argument. And we know that persuasive writers have to present evidence. And so here, they already have a passage, but they have to find the evidence that supports their answer. And so you'll see here, Cather characterizes the writing of 20 years ago as A, interesting but insubstantial, worthy of success, highly influential, condensed, and grandiose. All right, now we're going to look here, and she says the writing of 20 years ago, I have to look. Yeah, the grandiose journalistic successes of 20 years ago, stories that surprised and delighted by their sharp photographic detail, were really nothing more than lively pieces of reporting. The whole aim of the school of writing was novelty, never a very important thing in art. So, interesting but insubstantial sounds pretty good. And again, you can have your students break down the word insubstantial if they don't know quite what that means. In, not, substance, All right, something of substance, not substance. Worthy of success. Is there anything I can underline in here that would say worthy of success? This says nothing, so you can't really justify that. This says interesting but unsubstantial, so maybe here, lively pieces of reporting, that says interesting. Again, novelty, that says interesting. But here this also says never very important. So again, this insubstantial, you can underline never very important thing and justify the word insubstantial. Highly influential, you've got nothing to back yourself up here. Sharp photographic detail, really nothing more. So I can't prove that it's highly influential. Condensed and grandiose. Here we've got, is there anything that says condensed? Are the grandiose journalistic expectations? So here we've got grandiose, so I see students, immediately going, oh, well, it says grandiose there, it says grandiose there. We always want to say, okay, condensed. Do we see anything that's condensed? No. Here it says taught us to multiply our ideas instead of to condense them. And so looking here, again, they look at the opposite, and this word condenses here, and it says instead of condensing them. So this is a hard strategy for kids to learn because it requires them to go back in the passage. But if you say, prove it to me, and really sort of give me some attitude, back yourself up, hopefully that they'll enjoy doing that. Now, the nice thing here is that in the SAT, the very next question is going to say, what lines justify your answer? And these lines actually come from a different passage, so it doesn't quite work, but it shows it on the handout. But really the key here is that the first is you have to justify your answer to support it, but then the next question is actually going to answer that question for you. All right. This you see here later, and so this is the ACT aspect of it, and it says, again, it's the same tip, but the question is how the young men are able to be leaders. So two situations come before my mind. One commands with the ignoble goal of getting along easy, shunning work, and casting for the easy way. So the author feels that the young men who are leaders, how can you prove this? All right, so we're looking at spending their hours learning to be leaders. We don't see anything here. It's getting along easy, shunning work, and casting for the easy way. These are really good context clues. Go into debt to fulfill their obligations. Nope, we don't see anything about that. Be good at creating jobs. Never waste time or money. So here we have like the idea that it's the opposite. Never waste time or money versus getting along easy, shunning work, casting for the easy way. All right, so then my tip number 3, again, works for both SAT and ACT. If a question asks about theme or main idea, look at each topic sentence and in each conclusion sentence. And this is my very favorite tip because so often the kids go, oh, I do not want to read that passage the first time, let alone have to read it a lot of times and try and figure this out. So if I say, look guys, you only really have to read the first sentence and the last sentence throughout the whole passage. So suddenly, especially the kids who are, just really don't want to go with you, like, all right, I can read 6 sentences. And so what I did here is I sort of condensed those 6 sentences. One is sometimes asked about the obstacles that confront novice writers, arts that simplify, discarded sketches that went before, made the picture what it finally became. The process was one of simplification. Any first-rate novel must have the strength of a fairly dozen good stories. So these are sort of from the whole passage, the top and the bottom. So the question asks us, the central claim of the passage is, one good story is a product of many stories, which sounds pretty good because we have here, must be the strength, but it says must be the strength of a dozen fairly good stories. So this is a potential question mark. B, writing for the market demand is never good writing. There's nothing in here that's telling us that. Good writing is simple and uncompromised. Well, we say like art should simplify, discarded sketches, make it what it became. The process is one of simplifying. As well here is it says the strength of a dozen fairly good stories. So what's nice about C is that it is from more than one sentence throughout the passage versus this A, which is only really from one paragraph. And so you really want to talk to students about looking at the whole passage and not just being like, oh, I found one example in one paragraph, because this is saying the central claim of the passage, not of just one paragraph. And then journalistic writing loses its relevance quickly. Again, that's not the theme of the whole passage. So looking at the topic sentence and conclusion sentence of the whole passage is what's most important. All right, so then here, again, it also works for the ACT. And you can see here which of the following most fully lists ways in which the authors believe young men can be successful. So this idea of fully lists, that's the whole point of the whole passage. Sow your wild oats early and settle down to hard work. Right here, there's one sentence that said something about sow your wild oats, but that's it. This one, overall, man's life contingent on his emotions, aspirations, and determinations. Start out with determinations altogether dissimilar. Step by step, you have to bring vigor, determination to master them. Debt is the greatest burden. It makes him afraid to look honest in the face. Who will the leaders be? Will they be false? Will they be disloyal? No, never. So this idea, save money, do every job to your best ability, and be trustworthy. These are all aspects that they're talking about in here. Do not go into debt or buy a large house, and keep your family happy. Well, here, the idea of debt is put forth in the third paragraph, but that's not fully listing the ways. It's not just about the one paragraph. Be a good citizen and do not take on more work than you can handle. There's not really anything that says don't take on more work than it can handle. It just says step by step each day, bring vigor, determination. Today this man is a man of wealth and honored citizenship. So here, if we look at the whole passage again, you can look at aspects of the whole passage in A. Okay, so then both for the SAT and the ACT, I added a bonus, and these bonuses are different depending on things. So the bonus for the SAT is, again, this idea of when you think about a passage's theme or purpose. So often theme intimidated even my AP students. They would go, oh, theme, it's love. And I'd say, really? It's not just love, because love is great or love is terrible. What are we talking about? So when you think about theme, you want to think of an idea plus an attitude about that idea. All right, so again, they're looking at each of the topic sentences and the conclusion sentences in the passage, but then we're getting the main purpose, and we have to have the idea, the work of recent writers, what's good writing, again, what's good writing, but also what's the attitude towards that. So we're talking about obstacles that confront novice writers. Art should simplify. Discarded sketches are good because it helps you simplify. Any first-rate novel must have the strength of a fairly dozen stories. So is it criticizing the work of recent writers? Not overall. Is it advising the writers on what is good writing? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Comparing good writing to a work of art? This passage does, but that's not, again, if you're looking at the topic sentence and the conclusion sentence of the whole passage, no. Persuade writers not to write for profit? Well, we don't know that writers are always making a lot of profit anyways, but that's not the purpose here. Really, again, it is looking overall, what's the idea and what's the attitude towards that idea. And so it's B, to advise good writers. All right, and then for the bonus tip for the ACT, it's about what does an inference mean. And this idea, again, of inference is hard, so really the sense of that an inference is making a reasonable guess based on the information provided. And the more that I practice with my students, the more they're sort of able to, pick up, hey, you have to find all the clues, and then the detective makes that inference. What's the final whodunit? So this is a question, again, from an ACT-style passage. Reasonably inferred from these lines that the young man described is. And so we're looking, as always, at the topic sentence and the conclusion sentence. Contingent upon his emotions, aspirations, and determinations. Young man starts out, dollars are meant to be spent. Maybe I should sow my wild oats. But we got two cousins. One gets along easy. Was it not that his game is not worth the candle? So that this guy, overall, if we're just looking at top and bottom sentences, paying too high a price for the pleasures he gets. Well, he's sowing his wild oats. He's shunning work. He's employed by one firm and then another, and then he would, like another fellow would engage the task. No one would employ this man. So no one's employing him. Getting a lot of experience with different employers. Well, he's employed by one firm and then another, But when we're thinking about inferences, what overall is the detective guessing about this? We don't know that he's getting a lot of experience with different employees. We just know he's going to different jobs. Not capable of doing the work required of him. There's nothing in here that says he's not capable. It just says that he's not doing it. Going to have to settle down to work one day. Again, possibly, but the idea of what can back yourself up, what information are we given, here's what he's doing, he keeps being employed by one firm and then another, and finally no one's going to be able to take him. So maybe he's paying too high a price for this sowing of wild oats. So again, you're going to get these three really awesome handouts, this back-to-back and then one specifically for the SAT, one for the ACT. Use what you need based on where you are in the country, and really have some fun working with your students, whether it be saying lots of complicated words very clearly and often in class, or going through a handout with them and helping them break down some of the standardized test questions and the strategies to unpack them. So hopefully at the end of this webinar now you have some skills and strategies to use with the students and to give to the students so that they can do well on these very tough standardized tests. And I'd like to just point out to you, this is the Vocab Gal website and my blog, and you can either go to Sadler School or you can just Google Vocab Gal, and I will show up if you just Google me as well. And then you'll notice up here at the top I have resources, and this will give you all kinds of games and activities as well as my tip sheets, which is what we talked about today. So there's that, and then if you want specifically to drop down, you can come here by games, writing, words of the week. I have a lot of great author interviews with cool young adult authors that I sort of accost and ask why our words are cool and important, and so they share with students those key ideas. So really all kinds of fun stuff to use to help you with vocabulary in lots of different ways besides just our webinar topic today. And please tweet me, Facebook me, I'm on Pinterest, I'm on YouTube, I'm all places, so I'd love to hear what you thought and answer questions, because Laura's going to give me some questions right now.
That's a great segue. We have only a few questions, so I'm going to invite everyone to expand their control panel on the right-hand side of their screen, and you'll see the question box, and just expand the question box and type in a question that you have for Sarah on either what she's presented today or any other question you might have about vocabulary instruction, vocabulary development. So Sarah, here's our first question. The SAT is being redesigned, but where do you get your SAT words?
Thank you, Laura. I actually use the Sadler books, and that is, I was brought on because I love the Sadler vocabulary books, and I just sort of went up at a conference and said, I love your books, because they really are great, and I was really excited because in the front of the book it says where they're pulling the words from, and the Sadler company books are made because they are pulling from the word list that the SAT and ACT writers pull from as well. So I'm using the Sadler vocabulary books. So if you need a copy, talk to us afterwards, and we can get you a sample.
Sure thing. Oh, absolutely. And when is the new SAT going to be given?
I think it's starting this spring, right?
Yes, it's March 5th. That would be the first one. I know that because some parts of the country, the old SAT was supposed to be given on a snow day, and that was canceled, or postponed. So there will be one more date, the end of February. I want to say the 20th or the 26th. Okay. That I guess it's the 20th. That will be administering the old SAT, but the new one will start on March 5th. Okay. Are there any resources for English language learners? Do you have any suggestions for English language learners?
Thank you. I get that question a lot. And in terms of ELL students, I would really direct people to the resources, because I find that regardless of what vocabulary list you're using, all of my strategies can be applicable to whatever words they have. And so really, and also my tips, you can teach them. And I am friends with a a lovely gentleman who's been coming in and teaching our ELL students how to navigate some of these tests. And really, it's just sort of about looking at the tests and giving them strategies about elimination. And just like we went through to here, justifying your answers, putting the words in context. And then the more words that they know, the better, clearly. So lots of talking using vocabulary, and all of these resources are playing games, playing apples to apples with words, and so making words fun to interact with for those students, especially since it's not their English isn't their first language. So the more that they can play and laugh and learn with words, the better.
That's really important, and I think it also is part of the answer to the next question, which is how can I make vocabulary interesting to high school students?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say you have to love words and be excited about words. And because if you come in and say, "Well, we got to learn words today," so I also say, you know, you fake it till you make it. And I have always loved words in general. But I am excited, and I genuinely am excited when a student comes in and says, "Wow, I saw that word that we learned the other day," and sort of rewarding them and acknowledging when they know words and they get excited about words. And again, making it exciting, I really, I do 2 words a day, and we talk about the words, and then on this resource page, you'll see the sheet I have the students fill out. They put down the word, they put down that synonym, like we talked about, that they can really sort of latch onto and say, okay, I understand what this synonym means, so I understand what this word means. And then they write a sentence about what they love and put that word in a context that they love. So if it's a basketball player and he wants to write all the sentences about basketball, awesome. I had a girl who loved Breaking Bad, so all her sentences were, you know, pretty bad because they were all about terrible things that the characters in Breaking Bad were doing. But she loved that show, and so she really loved to link those words in, and so she remembered them because they were about something that she cared about. So really giving them that idea that these words should be linked to what you care about and what you know. And then just seeing relevance to other places, showing students the author interviews. John Green talks about why words are cool, and Veronica Roth says that. So when they stop believing you, I always turn to an author celebrity and let them sort of do the explaining for me. And again, I have lots of games to play on the resources, and they enjoy those, and they see things as more relevant and more fun when they can learn in a more lighthearted way. So, and please feel free to contact me and ask me for other questions or suggestions, but I would say start there.
Okay. Let me see here. You know what, I just have an idea, Sarah, that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the controls back.
Please do, because my lights just went off.
Oh, yeah. And so I am showing your website, Vocab Gal. It's actually our website with your blog on it. So I just want to show people how interactive this is. So here are the vocabulary games for grades K-5 or 6-12. You go there and you can read about those games that Sarah has posted. So she's written about the games. You can go ahead, here's 17 printable vocabulary building games. This might be a very popular one. And at the end, you have the downloads. So all of them will be downloadable at the end of each of the blogs, all 17 of them. Now, Sarah's blogs are very timely. She does 1 or 2 a week. If you'd like to go to the resources and see her downloads, you can see her activities, her games, her tip sheets. Now, the brand new tip sheets will be listed here underneath these resources. So you'll see that we have charts and posters that she's created, word walls for each grade. When you're going to NCTE, she's able to give you some tips on going through a conference and what to pack. Top 3 mistakes teachers make. The advice for new teachers. Different flashcards. So these are all very useful for a lot of different grades. They could be adaptable, but we do have grade spans here. One of the greatest things she has are the games. And she's very creative. I have to say, Sarah, you've done a great job with your creativity. Scramblez game, like Scramble, or Scrabble, I'm sorry. Go Fish, baseball. We have a great one coming up that she will be promoting in March, which is a March Madness bracket for vocabulary. Sorry, that just flipped.
Yep.
So that's a cool one. And all these other games. And Vocabulary Land, a takeoff from Candyland. So do check out the resources and Sarah's blog. The author interviews are phenomenal. They're great. They're the type of thing you can really play in your classroom and show your kids the fun that authors have using words, that authors are real people. They're not much older than them if they're in high school. Some of these authors are very young, and they have the same interests of them. So that's what we have. Let me just go check to see if we have any more questions. Nope, we're out of questions. So at this point, Sarah, do you have any last remarks to make?
No, just please, again, feel free to email at any time, tweet me, give me a message on Facebook. If there's any other questions you have, I'm happy to answer. And I really hope that you find that these have been helpful to you, and check out our other webinars coming up.
Yeah, that's right. We have another webinar on February 24th, and you will all be invited to that webinar as well. We want to thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. We know that you're very busy and it may be a long weekend coming up for you, so we do appreciate you logging in and spending some time with us. If you have any questions in the future that you think about, you can get on the blog and email Sarah directly, or you can email me at legan@sadlier.com. Well, thanks again, everyone, and have a good afternoon. Bye now. Thank you, Sarah.